Hi guys, it's Jason here from Headfirst. One of the most common questions I get about my Origin mod is, does it work on an Origin 50? The answer I say is yes, but I do realise that I haven't featured too many Origin 50s getting modded. So just today I did the Plexi mod on an Origin 50, so I thought I'd roll the camera and give you a bit of a rundown on the differences between the Origin 50 mod and the Origin 20 as it relates to the Plexi mod, right? There are three Headfirst mods: the original 800 mod, the Plexi mod, and the kind of metal mod, which is a diode clipping Jose kind of style thing. So this video is about the Plexi mod. I'm just going to focus on the differences. We're going to have a listen to this amp, which I'll be doing by miking my greenback loaded old Marshall straight front cab with greenbacks in it, and I'll take you to the bench and give you a rundown of the differences. Alright guys, well let's have a look at this Origin 50 Plexi mod. Now, I've already featured two videos obviously on the Origin 20 Plexi. One quite recently actually. So what I wanted to do with this walkthrough is just talk about the differences. Now, the Origin 50 is a fixed bias amp, right? So here's the bias adjustment pot right here. The 20 is cathode bias. You won't find this. So there are kind of like, and then through the preamp, there's some subtle changes that Marshall must have made with respect to voicing the amp so that, you know, they kind of sounded okay with the power section that they had. So look, the guts of the mod is the same, but let me just kind of talk through and highlight what some of the differences are. The first thing is that in the Origin 50, both the gain pot and the tilt pot are 1 meg audio taper. In the Origin 20, they're 100k audio taper pots, which, you know, interesting choice, 100k, but anyway, that's what the Origin 20 has. So if you weren't doing a switchable bright cap, which is what I'm doing on these Plexi mods now, you could actually reuse the stock gain pot and reuse the stock tilt pot like I have here. So in the Origin 20 Plexi mod, you refer to the other video, you'll see that I pulled this pot as well and replaced it. With this amp, I only had to pull the gain pot and replace it because the customer wants the push-pull with a bright cap, 4700 picofarad bright cap here. So this arrangement here is the same, but I'm reusing this pot. So I'll show you some photos of kind of this arrangement here so you can kind of get a sense of how it's set up. But because I'm reusing this pot, rather than wiring to the lugs like I did in the Origin 20 video of the normal channel pot, I'm doing that by wiring to some of the pads that are available on this PCB once I remove those three components there, C102, R101 and C101. The rest of this is all unchanged. Okay, so in terms of the Origin 20 mod, it's all the same. Mixer resistors come together, and then we come into the grid of V2B, a 22 nanofarad coupling cap here, which is the input to the phase inverter. Now, this mod in the Origin 50 is simpler because I didn't have to change the phase inverter at all. In fact, I've kind of gone with the standard presence that the Origin here has had. I've got a very simple post-phase inverter master volume here. On the Origin 20, these bias splitter resistors are actually separated, kind of further apart. And you can see right here R41 and R42 much closer together. My post-phase inverter master is just straight in there. And let me talk about voltages, because this is a key difference between the Origin 50 and the Origin 20. The Origin 50 runs a B plus of about 455 460 volts DC, which is pretty much, you know, that's a legit 50 watt Marshall. Okay, so these Origins, you know, they're in the 50 watt mode, they are set up in terms of supply voltage to be just like a proper classic 50 watt Marshall. It's a shame they didn't make the circuit classic circuit, but anyway. But because of the power scaling setup, right? So this has got the the high, medium, and low mode on the power scaling. It's not a traditional B plus line where you go from mains to screens to phase inverter to preamp and so on, where you normally see dropper after dropper after dropper. They're all on the same B plus string. It's not the case in these amps. So you have the mains, the screens, and the phase inverter on one fork of the B plus line, and the whole preamp on a completely separate fork. It kind of means that the voltages in this amp are nothing like what you'd see in a 60s, 70s, or 80s Marshall non-master volume 50 watt. So the changes that I've made to get us closer to those voltages here are 26. This was a 10k, it's now 22k. That's a 2 watt resistor there. R8 was 4k7, that's now 22k as well. R9 was 4k7, and that came out, and that's now 10k. That 10k was actually in that position there, so I pulled that out and put it over here to reuse it. And what this is doing, this is the dropper for the phase inverter supply node. So this gets the phase inverter supply to about 370 volts. Still a bit high. I like kind of 330, but I don't want to go too low, because when you piss around with this power scaling, the voltages go all over the place. And if I made this too low, then when you go into the low mode, it's just going to be so bloody low. So 370 is kind of okay. And this dropper here is setting up the B plus supply, which then feeds V2 and V1. And with that 22k and that 10k, we now have a supply here which is only about 20 volts away from the kind of stock Marshall, right? So again, didn't want to go too low, because when you play with this power scaling, the voltages go all over the place. So I've kind of set it up so that in the high mode, it's pretty close to a stock Marshall. I recommend doing these changes because it will change the tone and the feel of the amp. This thing sounds like a pretty legit 50 watt non-master volume Marshall, like a 1987X, but cheaper.